right, good evening, everybody. Channel 79, we're good to go. Thank you. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Oxbridge Elementary School Building Committee to order this evening. I'm Jamie Stevenson, your first selectman, and I'm here only to get you started. After tonight, you guys will take the ball and run with it. I want to acknowledge our other, Tara Ockman, Chairman of the Board of Education, is here. We have a number of representatives from the administration, Dr. Elliot Landon, Mike Feeney, Finance Director, and Mike Lynch, Facilities Director. They will all be familiar faces to you as you work through this project, along with some of my town staff. We have Town Administrator Kate Bush here, and Linda O'Leary, who is in my office, who will be invaluable to you with the protocols around filing meetings and posting agendas and the like. So we are, as you can see from the agenda, we are a special meeting this evening. And what that means is that we can only do the business that you see listed on tonight's agenda. There can be no other business that is handled outside of these items, but you might note that we purposefully made item 7 very general, in case there are other issues that we might want to discuss this evening. So I think first and foremost, we should introduce ourselves to one another. So I'll start to my left with Diane.
My name is Diane Boston. I've been a resident of Darien for over 20 years. 3 kids went through the school system. One's in high school now. All went to Oxbridge for all their time here. I'm an architect by license, and I worked part-time at home as I'm raising my kids as well. I'm currently at Yale University getting a master's in environmental studies.
That's awesome. I should mention that you probably already looked through your binder. Everybody's contact info's in here, and everyone's resumes. Everyone look back and see how incredible you all really are.
Well, with that, I'm Kip Coons. I'm the representative from the Board of Selectmen on this committee. I was on the Garage Building Committee. I'm a longtime resident of Darien since 1944, and I went to schools here, and my children went to Royal School, and then my grandchild's children that went to Oxbridge. One's still there.
Rusty Schreiner. I've been here 45 years. And my kids grew up here, went through the school system, and I'm a Bostonian, so I'm a little tired today.
Of winning?
I never get tired again.
And I'm Mike Lauferi. I've lived here for almost 30 years. I always thought that was a long time, but going up to 45. I raised my children here, my wife and I. Raised our children. They actually started at Oxford School and went through the school systems, the middle school and the high school. One actually lives up in Boston now. Took me to my first Red Sox World Series game this year. And I have another who lives here in town. And I too have a grandson that was at Oxford School, and another will be attending as well. In terms of my background, you probably saw it. At least the members here. I worked at a firm named Accenture. If you don't know the name Accenture, it will come back to you when I tell you. Formerly it was Anderson Consulting, before that Arthur Anderson. Always on the consulting side, so I could retire early and stay away from scandal. And in terms of building committees, I've never been on a building committee. When I received this on Friday, I was wondering what I volunteered for, but I'm delighted to help this project and contribute with my skills, hopefully, and my time.
Great. Duke Deneen. I'm the representative from the Board of Education. I've been on the Board of Ed for a little over 5 years. Been in town for over 20. I think my wife went to school here when this was Mather School at one point in time. I have 2 in high school and 1 in Middlesex moving up to high school. I'm a local banker in New Canaan, so the commute wasn't too bad this evening compared to those that might come by train. Yeah.
Randy Giraldo, resident of town for 6 years. I have 3 kids, 9, 7, and 4, all at Oxbridge. Fairfield County resident my whole life. Born in Bridgeport, raised in Stanford, and moved to town about 6 years ago, primarily for the school system. Lifelong career in real estate, 21 years, spanning a variety of disciplines from ground-up development, entitlement, financing, leasing, asset management. Currently work at a real estate financial services company focusing on portfolio management.
I'm Katie Lublin. I've been in town for about 10 years. I have 3 kids. My oldest is in 5th grade at Oxbridge. My daughter is in 3rd grade, and then my youngest will go to kindergarten there next year. I worked in finance and architecture in the city, and lately go to a lot of meetings around our schools in town.
I'm John Zakrotsky. I'm chairman of the Board of Finance, and that board's representative to this board. Like Kip, I served on the Public Works Building Garage Committee, so we've got a lot of reps with just meetings and the cadence of a committee like that and how it can help and the kinds of questions you can ask to ensure that the project is, we assist in the project's success. We certainly didn't do all the heavy lifting like the staff and the construction companies will do. I think that was the first building committee that we had chartered under Jamie's good idea to create these, and so I'm a huge fan of the concept as well as what we can accomplish as a board to help out. I've been in town for about 14 years and been on the Board of Finance for more than a decade. I currently am the Chief Operating Officer for a middle market private equity firm, and I worked at another PE firm before that and was at McKinsey for 16 years before that. So happy to be here.
I told you, you're all very incredible, and I'm very pleased.
And entertaining and good looking, let's not forget that.
I'm sure that it will be noteworthy to people who watch you work, how deeply invested the Oxbridge school community is here in many different ways. So I want to thank you very much for your willingness to step forward with this very, very important project for the town of Darien that will, as I mentioned in my introduction letter, it will serve our students and families for decades to come. So it's going to be very exciting. First order of business, so I can get out of your hair, other than any questions you might have of me on the process or whatever, is to elect officers. We need to elect a chairman or co-chairman. My recommendation to you, but you can do whatever you like, is co-chairmanship. Seems to work well because everybody has busy lives away from this volunteer effort. And a secretary who can take minutes of every meeting and work with Linda to get those posted on the website. I'd like to open the table to all of you to discuss who might be willing to stand up and lead this effort. It is a team effort, and you're going to be guided ably by those folks that have done projects like this before, and of course our school administration and town staff, so don't be afraid.
I'd just like to say I'd like to encourage the idea of co-chairs.
Yes.
One of the things that we discovered in the garage building committee is we set certain limits about approvals, so getting financial approvals. The first would be the on-site facilitators, which would be, in this case, Mike Lynch. And then after that, it would be Mike plus one of the co-chairs. And then after that, it would be the whole committee. And in order to keep things moving quickly, having a co-chair available is really, really helpful. And also, it takes the burden off of the chair having to always be here. And Katie is our alternate, so you're here to basically in case one of us can't fill our quorum, which sometimes will happen, believe it or not, more often than not. So that's my first thing. And the other part was the secretary role is usually given to the person who fails to show up at the first meeting. But since you're all here,
Last one in.
I think the real point here is that while there should be somebody who's named as secretary, I think everybody should sort of take a rotation at it, as long as we get the idea of how we're keeping it very abbreviated, so you don't feel like you're constantly the scribe for the meeting all the time.
Yes, and we can give you guidance on how to take minutes. They don't have to be a transcription of your meeting. It's really a record of your actions.
Right.
So, I'd like to say that from my perspective, selfishly, as first selectman, I'd encourage someone perhaps on this board who has served in the capacity on a building committee in the past to consider stepping forward to chair or co-chair this committee. I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, that's real weak.
So I-
That's a real weak hint.
Well, there are several of you around the table. I was being very open. But, you know, Kip, would you give consideration to co-chairing this committee?
I'd be happy to co-chair.
Fabulous.
Co-chair.
Okay. Okay, so we have a co-chair on the table. Is there anybody who would like to work hand in hand with Kip, learn from Kip?
No, I'll work with him.
Yeah.
Come on, Duke. No.
What do you think?
Sure, I'll co-chair it.
Great.
Outstanding. See, now we get the guy who really understands the Board of Education on the committee.
Okay, so procedurally, I need to ask if there are any other nominations for co-chairs for the Oxbridge Elementary School Building Committee. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve Kip Coons and Duke Deneen serving as co-chairs. May I
So
have-
moved.
John moves, may I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I think that was Randy.
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, John. Okay, then I will turn it now to Kip and Duke, and you can run that same process for the Office of Secretary.
Is there an offer for secretary? Hearing none.
I mean, I'd be happy to do it, Kip.
We give that a try? That'd be great. I can assure you, it would not have to be a sole
All
role.
right.
Okay, so just in fairness, are there any other nominations for the Office of Secretary? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve Michael Alfieri to serve as secretary.
Moved.
Randy, second, John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. Excellent. Okay, Kip and Duke, it's all yours.
In the package is a building committee charge that basically is our guideline of what we're supposed to be doing overall. I hope you've either read it or had a chance to. If not, please do so. I should tell you in advance that the gentleman to my left, Mr. Schreiner, didn't mention this, but he was the chairman of the Middlesex School Building Committee. Lucky guy. That was, what, 5 years?
5.5 years of purgatory, yep.
We're not doing that this time.
It's a well-built building, you did a good job.
He knows a lot about the charge, he knows a lot about the process, and frankly, the two of us, Rusty leading the way, are building, and you saw it in his resume, a construction project manual for the town. With regard to the building committee charge, Duke, is there something we should add onto this right now, or just go over it? I'm not sure.
No, I think it's.
It speaks for itself right now.
I think it speaks for itself.
Is there anything that the member of the Board of Education or the administration would like to add to the charge at the current time? It's complete as it is? Okay, great.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple of things.
Oh, sorry.
B, I think it's important that we not only spell out that we're selecting the architect, but a construction manager,
Absolutely.
because they really should be done at the same time. Down in G, supervise the expenditure and such appropriations, and the budget that's related to it. Something that I'm not sure where it fits in, but really what we're also doing is overseeing the construction manager and architect or the building process, which isn't spelled out in there.
Okay.
Let's see. This is small h, occupancy by August or September? When do you start school?
August.
August. That's H.
I should add that in the charge, under Item D, we said, file for a grant application with the State Department of Education in accordance with state regulations no later than June 30th of 2019. That's probably going to be a hard one to meet. Because, and I'm not sure what it's a consequence of not meeting that we have another year away in construction.
It is another year if you are applying for the grant. They only accept applications in June 30th.
Correct. But does that stop our building process?
My understanding is you can go forward with all planning, but you can't put a shovel in the ground if you'd like to apply for a grant until you
Get the
have the
grant.
grant. So you could continue with any planning phases, but no construction can begin.
So that is, you know, if we want to get the school up and going by the earlier date, that's a tough road, that's a tough deadline to meet. We don't want to rush it, but we want to make sure we do it right, but at the same time, we don't need a lot of delays in some of the processes that sometimes take place. Just to make sure you're all aware of that.
What's the scope of the grant generally? Is this in terms of the percentage of the project costs that we'd be applying for generally on something like this?
Historically, it's been about 20%. Mike, has it changed any? And it's 20% of eligible costs.
Right.
You're going to find that there will be ineligible costs. So I think in the past things, it's dropped down to like the high school was maybe around 14 or 15% of the actual cost.
When we got down, okay.
Yeah.
It's very specific to educational space.
Right.
It's
That's
significant.
what draws it down.
It's significant enough
Yeah.
that the Board of Finance probably say you want to get.
Yeah.
Well, no, we need to manage our schedule and processes to make sure that that grant is handled with precision. So
Okay.
if we can get it done by the end of June, I think that's great. But if we can't, given the percentage of cost involved, we really have no choice to delay the opening.
Okay.
Kip, another question. What's the scope of the application, and have we done one for the middle school or the high school? As an example that we would look to?
Scope the application.
The application itself.
Oh, the going to the state?
Yeah.
That is a function of,
Yeah. The superintendent signs off on the application to the state, but most of the work comes from the building committee, so it's a little bit of a joint effort, but it is a voluminous filing. So there's a fair amount of work. One item is proof of full municipal funding, and I imagine the RTM and the Board of Finance will need materials in order to be able to move forward with that. So while we do the final sign-off, most of the information we'll need to do that comes from the building committee.
right,
It's a lot.
it's a lot. Yeah, so that's why the June 30th deadline is pretty tight.
But is there like a key item that would make June difficult? Like schematic drawings or anything of that level?
Town approvals.
Town approval.
Go into
That's
go into the RTM to get their approval is the big
Okay.
thing. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to go to the RTM and give them, here's a range of numbers, or a range of costs. We want to go with a total package.
Okay.
This we learned from the garage building committee.
Right.
And
I mean, the whole point of this is that going to the RTM means going there for an appropriation. Then that's kind of the final decision that's made that says, here's a pile of money, go. Well, to get to that point, right, we need to choreograph a lot of work.
Wow.
And I think Kip is right. It would be very difficult to plan this out to everyone's collective satisfaction, get it through all the relevant boards, and then ready to go at the RTM level by June 30th.
By June 30th.
yeah.
Practically impossible.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
Well, we wrote the charge that way to draw everyone's attention to it. So maybe it's an impossible.
It has my attention.
But the idea was that, okay, we probably won't be able to make it, but why not at least make sure that everybody, any architect we talk to, any construction manager, they understand that we're trying to meet it. Maybe an impossible deadline, but time is of the essence.
Right.
That's really the essence, the
Fair.
answer. Yeah, what we don't want to do, Randy, is put up a number, a trial balloon number, and then well, no matter what you say, it becomes written in stone. That's it.
Mhm.
And now you come back with all your bids in and all your drawings done and everything else, and you find out it's more. And then you have to start to quote value engineer, which is one of the dumbest words of the English language, trying to get down to your line in the sand, which you can't do. So the idea is don't go there until you've got everything lined up. I'm sorry, Rusty, you had some other things?
Just last on K, report to the Board of Ed. Duke, you're going to be doing that.
Correct.
Right, on a regular basis. And to the RTM quarterly, that's something new.
You have an old version, I thought.
do?
You have an old version.
Yeah, I think it's an older version.
Yeah.
Some of these things are in.
Okay.
I thought, if you got it from your book?
I don't know where I got it from. What does it say there?
Let's see, or under K, Board of Education.
That doesn't say that here.
No.
This date on this is 10/15/18. Yeah, the
Board-
date here.
This is the Board of Selectmen, you don't have that, this is adopted. by the
No, I
Board of
don't.
Selectmen.
Okay, no, okay.
Oh, you're working with
That
it.
should-
Old stuff.
Rusty, do you have, were you provided with a binder?
Yes.
It should be in your binder.
Okay.
The 10,
So Kip, and on K, which I think Rusty's referencing, Duke does provide regular updates, or will provide regular updates to the Board of Ed. I think specifically what K also deals with, if there is a feeling in the building committee that an educational specification has to be changed, the building committee needs to come have that conversation with the Board of Ed.
Okay.
And I think that's what Kay is really referencing in terms of a general update. Duke could do that, but it would be more that the building committee feels that they need to revise something with the Board of Ed's approval.
So this is really, it focuses on ed spec
Spec.
change.
Yeah.
Correct. That's good.
it's fortuitous then that you're co-chair, because you can be empowered to take those actions.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay. See, I listened to all your stuff originally, and the Board of Selectmen made the changes.
Well, but that's unusual.
If there's no more questions on that, Duke, can you give us the overview of the project today? Because you're on, Duke, by the way, heads up the Facilities Committee for the Board of Education.
I did. We have a new facilities person for this year, but I did previously and kind of spearheaded this through the Facilities Committee.
Okay.
So just kind of at a high level, September of 2016, the Board of Education retained the architectural firm of KG&D to study and create a district-wide master capital plan that examined the needs of the entire district. The results of the study were broad. It's a plan that we continue to work with and will probably update within the next year or so. But the results of that study really got us to look at the needs of the Oxbridge Elementary School, and with that, the consolidation of the ELP program. The Facilities Subcommittee, the Board of Education, the administration worked throughout 16 and 17 to discuss the goals and bring the work to the full Board of Education. Oxbridge really rose to the level of priority because of the significant systems and facility needs at the school. And by addressing Oxbridge, there's the added benefit addressing some of the other space concerns once we get that school built. High level, Oxbridge was originally constructed in 1966, renovated over 20 years ago in 96. While it's the newest of the old elementary schools, it was constructed during an age where energy efficiency and construction materials were low priorities. The master plan identified over $5 million of work that needed to be done to the school simply to keep it running, while really not addressing any space needs or educational needs. The committee was informed that when approaching ways to address major system and structural concerns, it's not uncommon to find it more cost-effective to build new rather than to renovate. These factors include code upgrades, energy, accessibility, end-of-life system, hazardous materials, building timeframes, and abatements. After many facility meetings and a full board review and public hearing, the goal was to move a new build forward in terms of building a whole new school and consolidating the ELP space into that building. We looked at all the different options, building enclosure, building systems, interior features, site features, abatement, and hazardous materials all proved that building new was the best option to go forward. Just kind of a history of dates. March 14th, facilities discussion was ensued, and a date for a public hearing was set. April 24th, a public hearing on Oxbridge Elementary School was set. We had a good turnout. There's documentation in the binder around public comment. May 8th, the Board of Education approves moving the Oxbridge replacement forward. May 22nd, discussion on educational specs by the administration for Oxbridge. And September 12th, the Board of Education approved the Oxbridge elementary specs. In conclusion, the following points were considered and are really the main points for deciding to rebuild Oxbridge Elementary School. Aging infrastructure, major upgrades in systems, modernization of instructional space, ELP consolidation, health and life safety. Without swing space, renovation can only occur when class is not in session. This increases the overall construction schedule and cost many times. Security, the new building creates centralized main entry and flexibility in allowing separate access to common areas for other events. Security is a main concern of our parents in the school district right now. Duration of construction, new construction would most likely be 2 years versus 3 or more for renovation and abatement work. And cost benefit, new construction has greater upfront costs but lower annual maintenance and utility costs. The only thing that I would recommend on top of that is at some point in time we get on the schedule a tour of the building. I think those of us that participate in the spring tour of all our educational facilities, it's a good tour, but I know Mr. Lynch and the administration, when the time is appropriate, I think it would be beneficial for us to tour the school building and the site.
Great, I think it's a great idea. Look forward to setting that up.
So I hope that gives you an overview.
Anybody have anything they want to add or questions they want to ask?
I have a question about the plan as it's laid out in terms of the work that was done by this architecture firm. Is this for the purpose of making a decision about the 3 options, but it's not necessarily a site plan that we're committed to?
No.
It's just showing the feasibility.
Correct.
Of possible.
One of the things in the master plan that we decided to do broadly was to look at each school facility and see where we could build new while keeping school in session like we did with Tokenique. This is one of the schools that we can do it, and this is a school that has the most priority issues. But we are not wed to anything in that book. It was just a broad kind of overview done by the firm.
Yeah, Kip, I guess one thing I would add is I think it's important to keep in mind lessons learned from prior efforts, right? So I know a lot of the education specs have been laid out, but thinking about things that have plagued us with previous schools, right? So the idea that we're spending money because we don't have sufficient capacity at the high school, or the fact that at Tokenique we built spaces that clearly soon after construction were inadequate, like the size of the cafeteria, huge atriums in the lobby and all that sort of thing that in retrospect you look back at and say, I just would not have made those decisions. So one of the things I want to keep first and foremost with this committee's charge is that we are very clear about those past deficiencies, I won't call them failures, and a clear view about how to avoid them going forward to make sure that we don't have those problems in the future. Nothing pains me more than sitting on the Board of Finance and having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to figure out where to add capacity and is in a practically brand new high school, right? I want to make it perfectly clear. I'm not going to recommend we approve anything if there's even the slightest hint of that. So this point about KIPP and value engineering and saying we're going to skimp on capacity or we're not going to plan for the future or we're worried about how much that's going to cost. Believe me, I pinch pennies until they scream. And I don't want to spend money unless it's necessary, but it's very important in my view to make sure we avoid those types of problems with this particular building. Second thing I would say is that anything we can do to have a future look that provides for flexibility. So let's say in the future we have been wildly unrealistic in terms of predicting student population growth. To the extent that the design of this and the construction of it can be set such that future expansion is not as expensive as it might otherwise be. I mean, we all look at I-95 right now and see, not just because of eminent domain costs, but simply how the bridges were constructed at age 13 and 14 and how long it took to demolish those things because they were designed and built at a time where nobody thought it even remotely possible that we would need to expand that freeway. So it's very important, I think, that we have an eye towards that as a feature of this project. And then finally, one of the big things that helped, two major things that helped with the Public Works Garage Committee. One of them was careful tracking of change orders. We had a good process for not just hearing about them from the professional staff, but sorting through them, approving them, and keeping track of them so that we had always a quick answer to anyone who was interested in the project. We could talk about where we could stand at any moment in time with regard to cost and change orders, both positive and negative. And so one of the things we created for that committee was just a simple Excel spreadsheet that allowed us to keep track of that. So if anybody wanted to know, whether it was First Selectman, the press, the public, anybody wanted to know where that stood in terms of cost, we have an answer. we know exactly where things are, and there's no confusion about that. It also gives us a way to make sure we flash to the relevant parties that things are getting out of hand with regard to the budget. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but as a committee, we should be very much on top of that. I know my board will always be interested in that dimension of this committee's work. So if we can get into a good rhythm of tracking that sort of thing, we'll always have an up-to-date view in terms of where we stand on the budget. The last thing was how effective it was when the professional staff interacted with this committee. So when Ed and Pat for the Public Works for the town would come by and present to us where things stood, it was hugely helpful to have their perspective available at every meeting. I don't know, Kip, if you want to comment on that as well, but those guys gave us sort of a detailed rundown in terms of how things were going, really gave us comfort that we had good eyes and ears on the ground with the project and knew exactly where things were going, and gave us a chance to get answers to questions. I thought they did an absolutely outstanding job, and hopefully we can replicate that.
It's a great segue, because I was going to ask Mr. Lynch if he would become an ex officio member of this committee and be with us all the time and to be our eyes and ears into the project.
I hear wedding bells.
And we appreciate that very much from an administrative perspective, having Mike available to the committee.
So that's all I wanted to say. Again, I think this committee can be extremely effective, and those were a few points that I thought we should focus on.
You're excellent.
Obviously, there's others.
A question on that, John. Is there any official range or budget that to this point in time has been agreed upon or whatsoever?
So that's a good point. The specific answer is no.
Okay.
And not just no, but specifically no. And I say that because, to Kip's point, and Jamie's brought this up in the past, we've flashed budget numbers with previous projects only to have the design work and the construction drawings completed and have it become obvious at that point that we had to take our aspirations and pare them down to some preconceived number.
Yeah.
And it's not, again, that we want to spend money recklessly, we won't.
Yeah.
But I don't want to prejudge that. So in other words, I'd like to get the design and plan drawings out that meet the Board of Education specifications. And then let's take a step back and look and see how much it costs. My guess is that we'll do that as efficiently as humanly possible. And that's the number we're going to present to the Board of Finance and the RTM.
Well, actually, you can go even further. Ideally, we have a construction manager. We go out and take those drawings, get them bid to subcontractors, look at the bids, choose the ones that are correct, add them all up, have a cost estimator go through them one more time, which I know you really like to do.
Traumatized.
Randy's background, he used to count light fixtures. And go through it one more time, and then when we're all happy with the number, that's the number we're going to actually present to the RTM. Yes, Kate?
Remember, it's not just the construction costs, but there are also the soft
all the
costs,
soft
the
costs.
administrative, the bonding expenses,
Right.
the insurance, all those. So even when you hear a construction number somewhere down the road, you've got to be very cautious because that's not the complete cost of the project.
Bethany, those-
And you will bring those to us.
Yes.
So it's like the specifications are the driver at this stage. We've created the need, then we'll design that, cost that, and then it'll be an iteration to see if we can actually afford that. Right?
Correct. And there might be some
Essentially.
nuances in there. There might be some things that you want bid out as ad alternates,
Okay.
right? Sometimes that can be a very useful tool when before you go to the RTM.
So design is fully within the committee's purview, so that's it. Ed specs, if there needs to be changes, will be in the Board of Ed's purview.
Yep.
So that's the only kind of thing that we need to go back and forth. But in terms of design, in the layout, as long as it's keeping with Ed specs, that is fully within the building committee's purview.
And those ed specs may evolve as you watch the design process, and to the extent that you see something that you want to change or frankly have new ideas to add to it, when it's possible to do that within that process, I would encourage that. We want to hear from you.
I was trying to think through the constraints to give an architectural firm that's going to be in handed this design or this potential project. You would give them essentially, it's not a budget constraint at this moment. It's the
Function of
specifications.
perform.
Right.
Yes.
Here's your site and here's your specs.
Right,
Correct.
correct. And to the extent we have to understand the site, whether there's wetlands or whatever, we have to understand that as well. That's part of the process. So we know it's not buildable. We're also going to have to do tests on the boring samples, because there was an old, I think, was it septic field up there, Mike?
The original building.
Had a septic field. So we have to do that, and there's a playground in the back, but you have to make sure it's not in wetlands or whatever.
Right. Low point.
Yeah. Dr. Lennon.
I just wanted to state that when you work with the architect on the design, it's very important that you have the school personnel, like the building principal, actively involved in those discussions.
Absolutely.
As well as certainly the central office staff, for example, technology staff and the like.
Well, if it follows like the garage building committee went, they're going to have to be intimately involved in that process. Because otherwise, we're just up here as amateurs.
Correct.
Okay?
This is all a one-story concept?
It can be what we want it
Not
to be,
necessarily.
whatever.
There are some limitations based on
Sort of height,
Zoning.
height restriction.
regulations
Right.
on, how you need to construct a school, what grade levels must be on the first floor,
Mm.
could not be on the second floor, so those would be important.
That's a state zoning criteria or Darien
State, some of it
state,
is
right?
state in
Yeah.
terms of
I
the
would
grades
imagine
that
the
have to be
Darien
on the
one is
first
not
floor.
that detailed in terms of, latest and
Probably
greatest.
state building code,
Right.
actually.
Pre-K, K, and 1 have to be on grade level.
On grade level, okay.
One option might be also, well, it's been a while, I think we have a lot of lessons learned out of it, is maybe tour Tokenique also, because it's one of the newer elementary schools.
For the
And we can
lessons
have
learned.
some,
Yeah.
good feedback from those folks at Tokenique also.
Mhm.
It'd be great.
Great idea.
I mean, I haven't been in
Yeah.
the schools.
Perfect.
Mhm.
I see the next discussion is to take action on a meeting schedule. I think that's almost a little early, because we really don't know. I think that one of the ideas, because I know that both Randy and John commute, and the best thing for you guys would really be an early morning meeting, I would think. I don't want to speak, I don't want to speak.
I'm on the building committee for the Public Works Garage. I think we had those meetings frequently at 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
And so for me to get on a 4:30 train to get here at 5:30 to make
Yeah.
I mean, I got to tell you, it's just, and I don't know exactly what you do for a living, it's extraordinarily difficult to do that. And so I don't want things scheduled for certainly my benefit, but I just want to say that if we had meetings regularly at 6 o'clock, it's going to be awfully hard for me to make those on a regular basis. I mean, 7:30 at night works and 7:30 in the morning works, with much more consistency, but that could burden others as well. So I think coming to some kind of compromise or some variability where sometimes there's a later or earlier meeting and sometimes not. And we could do something that way. That's harder to do, of course, because we want to put together a calendar that could go public, so the members of the public want to be part of a meeting that they can count on that schedule. So we do have to kind of articulate that going forward. It may take a little iteration to come up with a compromise calendar that maximizes attendance and getting a quorum, which to Kip's point was hard last time.
so I'm open to any suggestions that anybody has about meeting schedule and time. The garage building committee met twice a month, basically. But at the 6 o'clock time we met. And there were, some people just couldn't make that meeting, unfortunately. But we had, strong staff support at the time. Here, I think that especially in the early phases when we're trying to put the concept together, and we'll be hiring an architect, we'll be hiring a construction manager, and we'll probably even be hiring that commissioning agent that you and Mike talked about, right? Early on. We'll probably want to, make sure that everyone's available for that. So.
There's one other point just on the calendar, maybe not the calendar point that I wanted to emphasize. I talked before about having professional staff at the meeting. At every meeting, it was Ed and Pat, right? Those two guys were at every meeting. And the great thing about that was it was kind of single point of contact, same guys, same set of information, same perspective every time. And they had a chance to hear our committee discussions and deliberations, so they got a sense of the cadence of our discussions and what was important. And so when they came, it was the same group where we could ask questions, and it was a continuation of the meetings that we'd had. And so one thing that I'd encourage is that we try to figure out a way to get a single point of contact or a pair of individuals that comes to every meeting and has sort of overall perspective as to what's going on. What I don't think we want to have is part-time folks, different people showing up at every meeting. I think that all leads to potential inconsistency, if not confusion. So I'd recommend that we figure out as part of this process some way to get a team from the construction side or the project management side who's there on a daily basis or something like that. You, Mike, or someone who works for you, to try and be attached to this committee on a consistent basis. I don't know if it's possible, but I know it was, again, very helpful when we did it.
At the middle school, we had the principal or the vice principal at every meeting.
Something like that.
And those were the 2 points of contact, and it worked out terrific.
Yeah, if I might say, that would be our intent, to have building, if possible, the building principal present at every meeting.
That would be great.
Yeah, that's what I was used to in New York. We would have the building principal, the business manager, the facility director. We actually, they didn't have a building committee like they have here, but we had construction meetings.
Right.
And there was the one that was the architect, construction manager, and the main contractors.
Well,
And we would be at those meetings.
right, well, when we were doing the garage, every week, when construction began, there was a meeting every, I think it was Thursday morning, at the garage with the CM. If the architect was needed, he'd be called in advance. We had the on-site individual. We also had the guy who was overseeing the account. And there was always one member of the building committee that was present at each one of those meetings. So that when they came back for every 2-week meeting or whatever it was, that person was familiar with what had happened actually at the meeting. And that was very helpful also. But those are when you're in construction.
So why don't we circle back and we will give you guys a team that we think can
Excellent.
attend meetings. And
It's a great idea. We appreciate that.
That'd be very helpful. Okay.
The cafeteria building committee, I mean, it just worked for those on there, but Friday mornings worked. It worked for the people that were invited to. It seems people either work from home Fridays, especially during certain times of the year, but it was a good option that worked for everyone.
What time did you meet?
We met at 8 o'clock Friday mornings.
The advantage of having a regular meeting schedule is that you file that with the town clerk. There are, government procedures on meeting notices. You can, to get started, you can have your first several meetings be special meetings, but they'll be like this one where you're limited in scope. But for example, if you're going to be touring facilities, that can easily be accomplished under a special meeting agenda while you're trying to ascertain when the best dates for regular meetings might be. So I might suggest that rather than get mired in coming up with that schedule today, maybe the co-chairs sit down and talk about the things that you need to achieve in the near term, laying out a general schedule, scheduling some tours, scheduling those as special meetings, and then I think that your meeting process will fall from that.
I agree. Agreed. And also, we ought to create at the same time, if you will, what we have to do early on here. I mean, we've got to interview and hire the architect. We've got to interview and hire the construction manager. We probably even ought to think about that commissioning manager early on. And any kind of testing, what we have to do, we'll turn to Mike. You know what testing we have to do over there in terms of abatements or anything else. We're going to have to go to all the various boards, planning and zoning, probably architectural review board at some point in time. But that's a little bit down the road. But to get us started, we have to come up with the various things we have to do and figure out what's an estimate to ask the RTM to give us the money to do that.
For the initial stuff.
Yeah.
For the initial stuff, just to hire the architect, to get the feasibility, the conceptual drawings done, and all that testing done, and that kind of thing.
I think one of the resolutions for the grant process is that the school board has to have a resolution asking the legislative body to authorize going forward with preliminary plans and estimates.
we have that motion ready. So
Yeah,
we're ready for it.
so it's kind of like a chicken and egg. They have
Right.
to do the resolution to the Board of Selectmen, and then the Board of Selectmen say yes, and then you go.
Okay.
We
You have to have a
drafted,
number
we may need
attached
to
to it?
deliver it to you at one point, but we have it drafted if we need to do it procedurally again.
Okay.
Yeah, do we need a number, do we need a dollar amount drafted to that? No.
You do not.
We don't to the Board of Selectmen for them to authorize you to move forward,
Okay.
but we can provide to you. I
Great.
think that's as quickly as.
That sounds very administrative, something that we could do immediately.
Okay, so then we just have to come up with numbers, so that we pick a big enough number to go to the RTM with, well, so we don't get caught and have to go back and,
Preliminary stuff.
for all the preliminary stuff. Now, we did enough on the garage building, so that when we went to the construction manager, and it was not noted at the time when the money was first asked, and we asked them to do all that work, that is to go through the construction drawings, get subcontractor bids, go over all the bids and present them back to us and what the recommendation was. And they were doing all that on the basis that if the RTM turned the whole project down, they were out of money. And we said, well, no, we'll put aside so much money for that work. So we want to make sure we have that kind of money in the project too.
Yeah, there's a series of things that we got to reasonably pay for.
Yeah.
To get work done, to get to the point where we have something to present. And
Correct.
so,
Correct.
That should be very easily approved. I forget what we spent for the Public Works garage. What did we have, 25,000?
No, I think the total was 230.
Okay, all in for all the work.
For all the feasibility work, the
Yes, that's going
drawings
to be
and all that.
more, it's going to be more for this project.
Yes, it will.
And
And
so-
I'll turn around to Mike and whoever to give us some guidance on that, what we need to throw in as terms of a dollar amount. Because we do want to get the RTM to give us the money to be able to go
Yeah, that's
forward.
something I'd like to get approved right away, because that'll help us grease the skid so we can get that work started as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, you shouldn't wait too long because there is, between going to Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM, it can be a 6-week process. And once it's appropriate, once the RTM approves it, you have to wait 10 days after that for the appropriation to be official. So, you're not getting on the February agenda, probably not making March, so you got to target April, May. So,
Government does
To
move
that point,
quickly.
though, what I'd like to do is see how aggressive we can be on that.
Yep.
So take those calendar dates, and let's actually work backwards to see if we can get
Exactly.
the rest of this process to work. And I agree with Kate, it's really hard, but to the extent we can push that, it just gives us the money to get this started immediately.
Right.
Because we're not going to get any work done on the grant unless we have that work done. So I would vote that suggest that we move really aggressively on getting that funding in place.
Thank you, Chairman of the Board of Finance. We appreciate it.
I'm happy to spend this money, however,
Actually.
I don't mean
Slightly
to be
more.
presumptuous, but is there a process in place for seeking out architects who have a really strong background in designing school buildings and have a really good track record, and a process for picking a construction manager who also has an excellent reputation?
I'm going to let Rusty speak to the first one.
Yeah, in Connecticut, there's literally 6 to 8 architectural firms of notable size and quality that we would go after directly. And then, of course, you have to publicly post it, and we get other ones in. But to answer your question, yeah, the architects are pretty simple. Same thing with the construction managers. There's a relatively small handful that really can do it.
And I think the architects want to make sure that the ones that are approved by the state, in the sense that they will be accepted, because I think we had some issue about that. The architects have to be ones that the state approves
For the grant?
for the grants.
So it needs to be a Connecticut architect.
If you-
No, they have to have done work in front of the state before, and done work in the state, and where they've applied for grants.
Yeah, we called up to the state. They won't recommend anybody, but if you ask them nicely, who do you see a lot of up here and that have been on top of the game, and they will tell you that.
Which ones were the architects for the preponderance of grants that you provided? We'll pick from that list.
That use the least amount of alterations, yeah.
Winner.
I think it's important also to layer the consideration of the sustainability experience of the architects, whether they've done any work that has sustainability components to it, and that may be more challenging to find within the 6 to 8 that have been seen by the state on a regular basis. But I think that's an important aspect of looking at an architect, that sort of experience as well.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen was specific about adding that to your charge.
It's in the charge.
So I do think, and Mike could talk a little more, is we see that when we put out RFPs for school construction, there are some familiar hitters or repliers, some of which built LEED certified buildings. So I do think you're seeing more of that, so that the concern that was expressed by the selectmen from the charge, I do think you'll see some architects, at least who have experience for you to choose from in sustainability.
Yeah, and those are the firms that Rusty was mentioning.
Well, almost all of them have somebody that's LEED certified.
Yeah, especially if they do
knows the
college
process.
where they can get the tax money abatement.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll go for that certification because it does cost more upfront.
I also think we should stress function over form, right? So I'm not saying Soviet-style buildings or anything like that, but we do want to make sure that we've not...
There's a camera watching, isn't there?
There's always a camera on. I violate my rule, which is you can't get in trouble for what you don't say, so anyway. But I do think it's important that we not permit the introduction of architectural flair and flourish that comes at the expense of that functionality, especially if that's money or space that can be dedicated to kind of what you're talking about, which is to ensure that this is sustainable. It's a sustainable building. So anyway.
So maybe one of the things we ought to do first is, I'll ask Duke to come up with maybe a couple of dates for a tour.
Yep.
Of both the Ox Ridge facility, and if Tokenique has some learning lessons in it, that for us to understand it. And after you read the ed specs, it may be more relevant what you see in the schools.
And we'd love to have building critics at those for those tours.
Absolutely.
People who hate those buildings, we want them.
So one of the things you won't see for the building that is specific to Tokenique was sort of the plans, and yet, as Kip rightly pointed out, the plans didn't necessarily meet what the other boards would approve. And so you had wetlands issues and you had some EPC issues, and so they went out with a plan, and then as they got into it, they found they couldn't do what they built. So you won't see that, but there's some history, and Duke and I can go over it so that he's fully versed in it and so that he can apply it to the committee. So I think what Kip has proposed is a far stronger process so far than what we've seen. So I think it will help, because some of it you just won't see.
Yeah.
Some of what Mr. Zabrowski points out, I think people will in the building, the users will be able to tell you, but
Yeah.
the process is incredibly important.
Well, there's just no question that thorough planning saves a lot of money. And you can waste a lot of money on projects when you don't even do your don't do your thorough planning. And here, it could be wetlands, we don't know. I talked with Mike earlier, and he talked about, PCBs and the caulk of the windows, and, how much does that leach into the building? I mean, all that stuff that normally wouldn't even think about, but you have to think about that kind of thing. So that affects your process of what, do I want to rebuild, or do I want to do a whole new building or whatever.
I'm particularly interested too, from your perspective, Mike, on lessons learned for systems and maintenance. How is the Tokenique school functioning in terms of HVAC and from even hearing from the custodial staff on material selections and how they're standing the test of time?
Yeah, we have some of that in the ed specs, like you're calling for a 4-pipe.
Right, 4-pipe system, right?
The way it is now, you're either all air conditioning or you're all heat. And it's a 2.5-day process to switch over all 48 valves throughout the building and test everything and make sure it works. So when you go from heating to cooling and then it gets really cold, you can't go back to heating. You're either air conditioning or nothing.
It seems problematic. So,
especially
but to Mike's point and Jamie's point, the high school and Tokenique, a 2-pipe system was decided upon, and it appears from looking through old notes for financial reasons. Part of the ed specs addresses concerns like that a 4-pipe system is needed.
Right.
Great. So
because you get that requirement that you have to go back and forth. You can have an 80-degree day in April and you can have a 35-degree day in May. You have to be able to account for that.
Flex for it, yep.
Yeah.
I think it was Dwight Eisenhower said plans are useless, but planning is everything. And so I'd love to make sure that as part of this planning process, to your point, Kip, that all these small things come out, right? So I want to hear down to the last detail, the stuff you don't like about these schools. And I think that if we can get a process in place to surface all of those things and get that worked into whatever building we end up designing, the reality is will it be a little more expensive? There's no doubt about that. Crushingly more expensive? I don't think so. The level of satisfaction we're going to have with a facility that simply does not permit having any of those sorts of problems in the school and then sets a template for everything going forward. To Jamie's point at the beginning of the meeting, we have something that endures for decades, right? And not something that we're having to approve money to change a few years after completion. So I definitely encourage that.
I think when you talk to the building staff, building principal, you'll get all kinds of ideas. For example, in an elementary school, if you have painted surfaces on the walls rather than tile up to the height, at least, of a student's head, your long-term maintenance costs are going to be significantly less. You may pay more up front tiling, the lower portion of the walls, but you don't have to paint them, and they're there forever. Whereas if you have paint and you have kids, little kids running up and scratching up against, you're going to wind up painting every few years in order to make the building look reasonable. So your initial costs may be high, but your long-term costs are probably going to be significantly less.
Anti-graffiti team from the New York subway will call them.
I'd also just like to point out that I know that we all understand that nothing in this book is set, and that's up to this committee's. But in one of the schematics that was drawn here in option 3, they do talk about reusing the 1996 wing of the building, and I would just like for us to make sure that we're looking at our best options and not just what the work that's been done before. To the point that you were hinting at earlier, past problems, renovating always has a large unknown. And, this part of the wing last week was had buckets underneath it and the ceilings were leaking. So I do think
The new
that
section?
The 1996,
Yeah, the new section.
And what is our responsibility as a committee with regard to reusing that based on what's been approved?
The option is in there to either use that or have that, or not use it.
I just wanted to point out that I just wanted to make sure that we weren't feeling tied to that because it was
changed in the committee, and it is a new school. I don't believe the 96 wing is in there anymore. The board was willing if you support it, but I do believe the language at this point calls for new construction.
Entirely new.
We've had some stunning
Okay, that
examples
helps.
where we tried to marry
One
renovated
decision we
space
don't have to
to
make.
new space. That has been quite challenging.
Yeah, if I could just throw out on that, one of the best Halloween stories that I heard about this was actually something you told at a school tour last year or the year before. What was the school where you went to where in New York they preserved a small part of the building and they built a whole lot of new around it, and just the smaller part to renovate that cost vastly more than the rest of the new building, correct?
They used the gymnasium. They tied a new school to the older gymnasium, which was the newest part of the building they were tearing down.
Right.
And it cost a ton of money.
Yeah, so to be clear, I really think that something we should have actively on the table and vocally, that this building is torn down to the ground, nothing left, zero, and we start over. I'm not saying that that's ultimately where we go, but I don't think we should rule that out. I'm very suspicious of even the 96 section. I've seen it for years. I don't like it, and we ought to think carefully about that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we have a point of view.
So the Board of Selectmen has an executive session beginning in a few minutes. You guys can certainly continue your business, but I will have to leave you. But I do plan to actively participate in this process. So thanks again very much for coming this evening, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you for charging me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
I think we're pretty close to the end of today's meeting, but if you can just tell us, Duke and Mike, whenever a tour might work, or throw out some dates and see what people can make.
One thing that we might want to consider is just to set the next meeting, rather than waiting or trying to have an email discussion about when we might meet, and try to get that put on the calendar. And then at that meeting, we can review the calendar options to try and map out 4 or 5 months of meetings if you like.
Should we do one more meeting in the evening, or is that gonna, and then think about our morning meetings, or do you want to go to the morning right away?
One point on the morning meetings, I do want to comment that the morning meetings are extremely difficult for parents.
Okay.
So like even with the high school, I know that was a source of frustration amongst parents of school children, that it's very difficult for them to attend.
In terms of public attendance. And,
Well, these meetings are open to the public, but most often meetings, they don't show up for these meetings. So I'm interested in, they can participate, but I would think that the convenience of the members of the meeting is more important.
And the reality is all this stuff is videotaped.
It's all videotaped.
Extensively. Everybody
Yeah.
can watch that.
I'm just providing comments that you will hear from
Which is
the
well-
people in town.
Yeah, I hear you.
We heard that for the cafeteria too, and the same voices spoke of the evening meetings are not convenient for some people too.
Well,
So
one of the problems
I
here
think-
is you have so many evening meetings. You
Right.
have the Board of Finance, you have the Board of Selectmen, you have the
Right.
Planning and Zoning, and Park and Recreation. I mean, this building gets really used.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to, and a lot of people whose time is not available other than, so. Today's the 4th. You want to do it in 2 weeks or earlier than 2 weeks?
2 weeks from today is President's Day, so that's a holiday.
You want to try Friday the 15th? Be less than 2 weeks, or is that too early to pop onto it?
Works for me.
sounds good.
When would you like to do it?
That works for me.
Can we do it in the morning?
Yep.
Because this is we're just getting started here.
Yeah. That is the start, that's the first day of winter break for the school system, but
Oh, it is?
Oh, it is?
They're off on the Friday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's not gonna
And then
work.
the whole next week.
That's not going to work?
Vacation.
But it's the.
I mean, it doesn't
that
bother
Friday,
me.
It doesn't bother me.
Oh.
Where are you going, Rusty?
I wish I had a place to go. Can I go? This is gonna be my vacation.
You can just babysitting your grandkids, so you can come.
I'm trying to, that's why I wanna come every week.
To avoid the grandkids, there you go. No, I can't do it today. I got to take care of oh no, I'm going to me. I mean, that would give us a short time, but it would give us time to rethink this and to get it going. It's Friday morning, okay?
Friday morning the 15th, what time?
7:30?
Fine with me.
Is that good? Yes. We can do it right here. And, you understand, we'll try to have at least some meetings that will be available to the parents that they come to. But again, all the meetings will be videotaped in any event, so they can see all of it.
Yeah, we should make sure to kick it off that we let everyone know and kind of reiterate things are warned and things are videotaped and people have the options.
Yeah, and we're very early in the process, Joe. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep. In the meantime, Kip, I will get back to you shortly with dates on the 2 tours, so we can do that
Okay.
as soon as possible.
when's the best time well, a tour has to be done when the schools are open, right, Mike?
Yeah, you want to talk to the building principal?
Right?
Friday the 15th.
So, you know, during this time when schools are
She'll
shut,
do the warning.
and they're not doing any sort
Put the
of
notice
testing.
out. but
Oh,
it's gonna-
Okay.
So would you-
Why don't we circle back to you all? with
Yeah.
some-
That's fine, I just
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
but it should be done during the school day then, is what we're
Well, it should
saying.
be done at a point where we can have the administrators. I'm not sure we
Well, you
have to
can
have
do
the
it at 4
kids.
o'clock.
Oh, okay.
You
So
know.
my guess is you're gonna wanna walk into things like bathrooms and things to really understand the school, because it's where a lot of the piping is. So you're probably going to where kids aren't in session, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all the school tours we've done for the budget season have always been on Saturday. And by the way, and we can do a separate tour, but keep in mind in March, I don't know if it's too late, we actually have a full day of Saturday tours for capital projects. And we could isolate the elementary schools to go on those tours as part of that effort. So, and not have separate meetings, but up to you. But you have a sense
Well,
of-
the Saturday tours, you only get the building administrator. You don't, you know, if you wanted to talk to, say, the librarian, or something, you're not going to see them.
True point.
Well, why don't we do this? We'll talk to the building administrators, see who they think would be valuable to make accessible to you, and then give some dates and times, mornings and
Great idea.
afternoons or weekend, and then the committee can choose from those.
Good.
what works
Great.
best.
Excellent.
You could do it during February vacation.
What?
I'm not going anywhere.
Excuse me, but the meeting for the 15th at 7:30 is in this building?
In this building, yeah. Right here.
Check with Linda, can you make sure that this,
The building will be open. Do you
It
need
is
to
open.
vote on that meeting, or just going to call back?
It'll be open.
open, yeah?
Okay,
And then we can meet in this space.
Definitely, yeah.
Right, thank you.
Any other business tonight?
I have a question as to whether there's anything we could do in the meantime, you know, so any individual research of sorts, you know, and any component of the work.
I would say if you go on the Connecticut website and you want to fall asleep, no, there's a lot of good information about the grant
The grant,
process.
yeah,
I would love to see
All
that.
the forms are there. I printed out a bunch of forms myself. I just prefer to read hard copy on some things. But
Right.
if you go in, it says building construction, grant process, construction process, and it's a good thing to familiarize yourself with. As you read through, you can pick the sections that you want to focus in on.
Okay.
I'm also curious if the board has like if there are any examples that they might know of as sort of a gold standard, any schools that have
That's
been
what I was
designed
wondering.
and sort of won awards.
Anywhere in the
something.
country, there might be
Yeah,
some
we
great,
talked-
and in fact, even using them as a
Yeah,
resource.
Tara and I talked
Yeah.
about that, and we can, between the administration and Tara, come up with whether local or not local. And based on the work we just did with KG&D, find out if there's schools that are out there to tour. There's an elementary build in Westport, right, Dr. Landon? Recent? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll organize that list
Not
also.
the
That's
Westport
great.
school that was closed for mold. would be good.
No, not that one. No one's going that one.
Well, actually.
None of the ones in Stanford either.
You can stand Darien for that.
It's not going to be closed for mold from what they brought in independents. They started with KG&D, who did the work here on the cafeteria, who came in with some $50 million project to clean up the school, or rip the school down, and they brought somebody else in, independent. And they're now talking about opening up the school in August of 2000, possibly August 2019, or in the worst case scenario,
Terrific.
January 2020. Yeah, I couldn't imagine where that idea ever came up from, where, because we always had issues, but those issues were all addressed by keeping the air conditioning running all summer. Somebody shut the air conditioning off. And
Because they
that
weren't that air
created a
conditioning.
disaster.
They have air conditioning. That's a miracle.
It didn't matter if they had 2
Just
pipes or
along-
4 pipes.
Exactly.
Along those lines, Joe, I was just wondering whether there's a component of work that we don't necessarily leave to the architects or the construction managers with regard to sustainability and, you know, net zero design, whether we should have some of our own, bring our own kind of ideas to the table with regard to that, and there may be potential for funding, or there may be potential for, you know, working with Energize Connecticut, or, you know, there may be some financial, some grants.
Here's the
I have a sustainable product company.
Oh,
So I deal
okay.
with this all the time.
So you're familiar
Yeah.
with.
We get a lot of money.
His
Yeah.
ice rink
Yeah.
is twice the size of the one in Darien and has lower energy costs. Okay?
Twice.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
big time. So we have some, that's that's one of the reasons he's on this committee.
Understood.
I thought it was because you liked me.
No, never. What?
That's why he's here.
That's why he's here.
What about schedule? I feel like a lot of dates just got thrown around, you know, June 30th, but wait, you need 8 weeks before you can go to the RTM, and there's
We need a
this,
Gantt
there's
chart.
that. We need a Gantt chart.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there's going to be 50 versions of it between now and putting a shovel in the ground, but I feel like the major milestones need to get put down on a piece of paper
Exactly.
pretty quick.
I
How do we want to do that?
I think that Duke and I should take a crack at that first
Okay.
and come back to the committee with, because I got to talk with Kate Bush, for example. I got to
Okay.
talk with Mike. I got to talk with, we've got to get it all together to figure out what are our various milestones.
Yeah.
But, so the committee has it in front of them before we even start.
Right.
And we'll
That's
have
gonna
that.
be key.
Hopefully I'll have it for the next meeting.
Okay. How about, just as a housekeeping thing, what about communication amongst committee members? This is new to me, but this seems like a very kind of formal, you know, taped. If there's versions of that flying around between committee members for comment, and is that not proper protocol in this type of setting where all communication should happen in this forum?
One of the things I think Jamie recommended is that to the extent you don't have it, is that you get a .gov email address for your work on this
Gotcha,
committee.
that's right.
Everybody
We
does
it.
have one.
Has that all been set for everybody?
Yeah,
That's also right.
you can use that.
Okay, that
Or you can
works.
use their own individual email. There's no problem communicating back and forth, I don't
Yeah,
think.
the only thing I'd recommend is that we try to get this set up to where emails and sharing and all that stuff is done back and forth through the .gov email. The reason is those emails, even if you delete them, are not deleted.
Got it.
So if we get a FOIA request or something like that, I can assure
Got it.
you,
Makes sense.
you're not going to want to comply with one of those if you're using personal email. So
Yeah, because then you have to have all your personal
you
email.
don't want that. So just make sure that you do any committee communication through your .gov email.
Got it.
Does the Board of Ed have a target date to open a new school?
Well, we did.
Till this
But
meeting.
at the end of the day, and it's in the charge, I think it's August of '22.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we want it built right. So we would appreciate pushing as hard as we can, but doing it the right way.
As soon as practicable.
Yes.
Yeah.
It cannot be a pest to it. You said something earlier, and I think every member of the committee should understand this. And that is, if people start floating numbers around, you're gonna wind up in a mess, because I was in a situation where the first selectman had suggested that we were gonna spend X dollars on the high school. It was like $20 million short of what we needed. And so, first there was a fight to get the money that we needed.
Yeah.
And then even with that, we still couldn't go to the true amount we needed. So we had to keep on going back and back and back for more money. And that created value engineering, which was all negative. So I can't stress enough that everybody, whatever numbers we have, keep them under your hat. Don't discuss them with anyone. Don't let it get out, or you could wind up with a figure that you couldn't live with.
Well,
Or
to
until
my-
they're firm.
Yeah, to my earlier comments, I think we specifically reject notions of talking about costs. And the reason is just what Dr. Landon said, it handcuffs the committee, it creates a negative public perception if we end up doing something differently once the design and plans come out.
Right.
So instead, it's important that we take the ed specs that have been provided to us and try to encourage everyone who's designing this building that we come up with something that is as efficient as possible. And as I said before, function over form, and meets all of those requirements and lessons learned from previous projects, and really checks the box in terms of having a building that maintains functionality well into the future, right?
Right.
And once we have all that, then we're going to see how much that costs. But we will not be tied to some previous number.
No. And that's specifically the lesson we learned going into the garage project. That's why we never talked about numbers until we were totally done. Totally had everything presented.
And by the way, no one was taken by surprise. We were very transparent about that process. Nobody was pointing at some previous number
Right.
and complaining about that. And the project came in under budget, so.
Miracles. No, it was 9% under budget.
Another question. To what extent have the other, like the departments in the town government, such as zoning, environmental, public works,
Architecture.
been involved in the sense of delineating the site constraints or the existing conditions, so that, because I'm just taking a look at the sketch here, on one side of this building, it looks like within 15 feet of the property line, which doesn't seem to be within the proper setbacks here. To this stage, are they on board? Have they kind of been involved yet, or is this, okay?
In the middle
Okay.
school, we got them involved way up front.
So they were involved in the schematic in the sense that the architects did go down to P&Z and talk about what the proper setbacks would have to be.
Oh.
But they were not involved in the sense that there was a formal hearing or EPC.
Right.
Okay.
EPC.
No
Well, that's
formal
important.
approval.
Yeah.
Well, just to know, because when we go out for design bids, we're going to need to outline all of the different constraints.
Exactly.
Which was part of the original plan of them looking at each specific elementary school property to determine, what the potential is for each of those properties.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
So there is a site plan, and there is just a site survey.
Survey.
Oh, yes.
Existing.
Here in town
Yeah.
hall, absolutely.
Is that something we could
Oh, you can look
start
at
with
it.
and work with?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Get a copy of
The copy's going to be as big as this table, that's okay.
it.
You can go look at
I
it.
have a table on that says this table, sorry.
Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay, thank you all very much.